Jon Snow spent 8 seasons of Game of Thrones insisting he didn't want the Iron Throne. He repeated the phrase, "I don't want it," so many times in Season 8 that it became almost comical. But here's the thing that drives fans absolutely crazy. Jon Snow was the rightful heir to the Seven Kingdoms. He was Aegon Targaryen, the legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, which gave him a better claim than Daenerys, Cersei, or anyone else in Westeros. So what would have actually happened if Jon had stopped being so humble, accepted his birthright, and taken the throne he was literally born to rule? Let's break down this alternate reality and see how different the story could have been. First, we need to understand why Jon's claim was so powerful. When Bran and Sam discovered the truth in Season 7, they learned that Rhaegar had his marriage to Elia Martell annulled by the High Septon. He then secretly married Lyanna Stark in Dorne. This means Jon wasn't a bastard at all. He was the trueborn son of the Crown Prince, making him the rightful heir ahead of Daenerys, who was just Rhaegar's younger sister. In the Targaryen line of succession, sons come before daughters, and children of older sons come before younger siblings. The math was simple. Jon had the strongest legal claim to the throne in all of Westeros. But Jon's claim wasn't just about paperwork and family trees. He had actually earned the respect and loyalty that makes a good king. He united the wildlings and the Night's Watch, traditional enemies who had been killing each other for thousands of years. He brought them together to face the White Walkers. The Northern Lords chose him as king in the north, not because of his bloodline, which they didn't even know about, but because of his actions. He retook Winterfell from the Boltons. He literally died and came back to life. When Tormund gave that speech in Season 8, he summed it up perfectly. Jon climbed on a dragon and fought the army of the dead. What kind of man does that? A king. Now let's talk about what happens if Jon actually accepts the throne after killing Daenerys. In the actual show, Jon stabs Daenerys in the throne room after she burns King's Landing to ash. Drogon melts the Iron Throne and flies away with her body. Then Jon gets arrested by Grey Worm and the Unsullied. But what if things went differently? What if Jon, instead of letting himself be taken prisoner, claimed the throne right then and there? Here's the reality. Jon would have had immediate support from the most powerful people left standing. Tyrion, who had just been imprisoned by Daenerys, would back him. Sansa, the queen in the north and Jon's sister, would support him, though she'd probably demand that the north remain independent. Arya, one of the deadliest people in Westeros, would stand by her brother. Bran, with all his mystical knowledge, could verify Jon's true parentage to anyone who doubted it. Davos Seaworth, a man known for his loyalty and honesty, would serve as his advisor. Brienne of Tarth would kneel to him. Even Sam, who would become Grand Maester, was Jon's best friend. The major obstacle would be Grey Worm and the Unsullied. They just watched Jon kill their queen. In the show, they demand justice, and that's why Tyrion suggests sending Jon to the Night's Watch as a compromise to prevent a war. But if Jon claimed the throne immediately, with the support of all the major houses and the north behind him, what could Grey Worm actually do? The Unsullied are a fearsome army, sure. But they're in a foreign land, their queen is dead, and they're vastly outnumbered by the combined forces of Westeros. The Dothraki horde mostly died at Winterfell. Daenerys's dragons are gone, one killed by the Night King and Drogon flying away. Grey Worm would have to make a choice. Start a war he cannot win, or accept what happened and leave Westeros. Most likely, Grey Worm would take the Unsullied and leave, just like he did in the actual show. They went to Noth, which is what they probably would have done anyway. The Unsullied were freed men. Without Daenerys, they had no reason to fight for a throne in a land that never accepted them. Jon, being Jon, would probably offer them ships and gold and safe passage. He'd acknowledge their pain and loss. That's who Jon is. He doesn't want unnecessary bloodshed. So Jon becomes king of the Seven Kingdoms. Well, probably 6 kingdoms, because Sansa isn't giving up northern independence. And here's where it gets interesting. What kind of king would Jon Snow actually be? Jon was trained by Ned Stark, one of the most honorable men in Westeros. He learned that a ruler must protect the people, even when it's hard, even when it costs you everything. He was Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, where he made tough decisions that got him killed. He invited the wildlings south of the Wall because it was the right thing to do, even though his own men hated him for it. As king in the north, he bent the knee to Daenerys, not because he wanted to, but because he needed her dragons and armies to save humanity from the Night King. Jon understands sacrifice. He understands duty. He also understands that being a good leader sometimes means making choices that people hate you for. But Jon also has weaknesses as a leader. He's impulsive. He charged headfirst into Ramsay's trap at the Battle of the Bastards, nearly getting himself and his entire army killed. Sansa and the Knights of the Vale had to save him. He went beyond the wall to capture a White to show Cersei, which was a terrible plan that got Viserion killed and gave the Night King a dragon. He fell in love with Daenerys and ignored all the warning signs that she was becoming a tyrant, even when Sansa and Arya were practically screaming at him to open his eyes. Jon is honorable, but he's not always wise. He leads with his heart, which is both his greatest strength and his most dangerous flaw. As king, Jon would need good advisors, and fortunately, he'd have them. Tyrion proved himself as hand to multiple rulers. Despite his mistakes with Daenerys, he's intelligent and understands politics better than Jon ever will. Davos is loyal, honest, and has a way of speaking truth to power without being disrespectful. Sansa survived years of abuse and political scheming in King's Landing. She knows how the game is played. She could advise her brother even from Winterfell. Sam would bring the knowledge of the Citadel. Brienne understands honor and military strategy. Jon would surround himself with people who care about the realm, not personal power. That's already better than most kings Westeros has seen. One of the biggest questions is what Jon would do about the system itself. In the show, Tyrion suggests that future kings should be elected by the lords rather than inherit the throne through bloodlines. Bran becomes king through this new system. But if Jon took the throne, would he change anything? Probably not immediately. Jon is a reformer, not a revolutionary. He'd likely keep the system mostly intact but rule with justice and fairness. He'd probably establish something like the Night's Watch oath for all lords. Make them swear to protect the realm and the people, not just their own power. He'd remember the common folk who died when Daenerys burned King's Landing. He'd want to rebuild, to heal, to make sure that kind of horror never happens again. Jon would face enormous challenges. King's Landing is destroyed. The city would need to be rebuilt from ash and rubble. The population is devastated. Thousands died in the dragon fire. The economy is in ruins after years of war. The Lannisters are gone. The Tyrells are gone. House Baratheon is barely hanging on. The power structure of Westeros is completely shattered. Jon would need to establish new lords, rebuild castles, restore trade routes, and somehow convince everyone that the age of war is over. It would take decades. There's also the matter of marriage. Every king needs heirs, and Jon would be expected to marry and produce children to continue the Targaryen line. But who would he marry? In the show, Jon was in love with Daenerys, and even after learning she was his aunt, he struggled with that relationship. Targaryens traditionally married within the family to keep the bloodline pure, but Jon was raised as a Stark. The idea would disgust him. He'd need to find a suitable match, probably from one of the great houses. Maybe a Martell to bring Dorne back into the fold. Maybe someone from the Reach or the Stormlands. But knowing Jon, he'd probably resist getting married at all. He never wanted to be king, and he never wanted the responsibilities that come with it. The more interesting question is whether Jon would even survive as king. In the actual show, Jon survives by going to the Night's Watch, even though the Night's Watch doesn't really need to exist anymore since the White Walkers are defeated. He lives beyond the wall with the wildlings and Ghost, finding peace in the true north where he always felt he belonged. But if he stayed in King's Landing as king, Jon would be walking into the most dangerous political arena in Westeros. The same place that got Ned Stark killed. The same place where every ruler either becomes a tyrant or gets murdered. Someone would try to kill him. That's a certainty. Maybe a Lannister loyalist angry about Cersei's death. Maybe someone who supported Daenerys and views Jon as a traitor. Maybe just another ambitious lord who thinks they could do better. Jon would need to sleep with guards outside his door. He'd need food tasters. He'd need to constantly watch for knives in the dark. The man who just wanted to be a brother of the Night's Watch would be trapped in a gilded cage, always looking over his shoulder, never truly free. And then there's the psychological toll. Jon killed the woman he loved. He stabbed Daenerys in the heart because she became a monster, but that doesn't make it easier. In the show, Kit Harington said Jon didn't even know he was going to kill her until the very last moment. It was instinct, family loyalty, and horror at what she'd become. That kind of trauma doesn't just go away. As king, Jon would have to sit on a throne and make decisions while haunted by the memory of Daenerys dying in his arms. He'd see her face in every council meeting. He'd remember the woman he loved who turned into a mass murderer. That's not something you just get over. Here's what makes this alternate timeline fascinating. Jon would probably be a good king, maybe even a great one, but he'd be miserable. Everything we know about Jon Snow tells us he never wanted power. He joined the Night's Watch to escape being a bastard. He became Lord Commander because he was elected, not because he sought it out. He became king in the North because his people chose him. Every position of leadership Jon ever held was thrust upon him. He never chased the throne. The throne chased him. So in this reality where Jon accepts his destiny and rules as Aegon Targaryen, king of the Six Kingdoms, you'd have a just, honorable, but deeply unhappy ruler. He'd do his duty because that's what Starks do. He'd make the hard choices. He'd protect the realm. He'd probably be remembered as one of the better kings in Westeros history. But every day, he'd think about the North. He'd think about Ghost and Tormund and the freedom of the lands beyond the Wall. He'd wonder what his life would have been like if he'd just said no. The irony is brutal. The man with the best claim to the throne, the man who could have been a great king, never wanted it in the first place. And maybe that's what would have made him perfect for the job. The best rulers are often the ones who don't want to rule. They understand the weight of the crown. They know that power corrupts. They remember that being king isn't about glory or conquest but about service and sacrifice. But would Westeros have been better off with King Jon Snow? Probably yes. Better than Bran the Broken, who has no emotional connection to humanity and whose main qualification seems to be that he has a good story? Absolutely. Jon actually cared about people. He fought alongside them. He bled with them. He knew what it meant to be cold and hungry and afraid. Jon wouldn't have been a perfect king, but he would have been a human one, and sometimes that's what matters most. In the books, which George R.R. Martin still hasn't finished, things might play out differently. Jon is still dead at the end of A Dance with Dragons. His last word before being stabbed was "ghost," which many readers believe means his consciousness went into his dire wolf. The show completely ignored Jon's warging abilities, but in the books, all the Stark children can warg to some degree. If Jon comes back in the Winds of Winter, he might be changed in fundamental ways. He might be darker, more ruthless, more willing to do whatever it takes. That version of Jon might actually want the throne. He might take it by force. George R.R. Martin has said that death should change people, that resurrection has a cost, and book Jon might be very different from show Jon. Martin has also confirmed that Bran becoming king was his idea, something he told the showrunners from the beginning. But everything else? The journey to get there? That could change completely. Martin is a gardener, not an architect. He lets his story grow organically. Characters who died in the show are still alive in the books. Plot lines that were cut from the show are still developing on the page. Jon's path to the throne, or away from it, could be entirely different. What we know for certain is that Jon Snow was set up to be the hero of the story. The Secret Prince. The Song of Ice and Fire. The union of Stark and Targaryen. The one who would save the realm and claim his birthright. And then Game of Thrones subverted all of that in the most frustrating way possible. Jon never sat on the throne. His parentage barely mattered. He didn't defeat the Night King. He killed Daenerys and then got exiled. For a character who was built up for 8 seasons as potentially the most important person in Westeros, his ending felt like a betrayal to many fans. But maybe that's the point. Maybe George R.R. Martin's whole message is that prophecies don't come true the way you expect. That the hero doesn't always win. That sometimes the right person for the throne is the one who doesn't want it, and sometimes the person who doesn't want it shouldn't take it. Maybe Jon's real victory wasn't becoming king but walking away from the throne entirely. Finding peace beyond the Wall with the wildlings, free from the Game of Thrones that destroyed everyone who played it. Still, it's fun to imagine what could have been. King Jon Targaryen, first of his name, King of the Undulls and the First Men, Protector of the Realm, the White Wolf, the King who came back, the Dragon and the Dire Wolf. A ruler who united the living against the dead. A king who knew the value of every life. A leader who would rather die than become a tyrant. In the end, Jon Snow didn't accept the Iron Throne because he was true to himself. He never wanted power. He wanted to do what was right. And sometimes, the right thing isn't wearing a crown. Sometimes it's knowing when to walk away. The question isn't really whether Jon should have taken the throne. The question is whether Westeros deserved a king like Jon Snow. And based on how the story turned out, with Bran as an emotionless all-seeing king that nobody really wanted, the answer is probably yes. Westeros deserved better. Jon deserved better. And fans definitely deserved better than watching 8 seasons of build-up lead to one of the most divisive endings in television history. But that's Game of Thrones for you. Nobody gets what they want. Nobody gets a happy ending. And the throne you spend your whole life reaching for might just kill you in the end. Jon Snow knew nothing, but he knew that much.